This morning's first scripture reading is from Exodus 16, 2 through 15. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from the heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instruction or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare to bring it in, it will be twice as much as they gather on the other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaining against the Lord. For what are we that you complain against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you utter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, 'Draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining.'" And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, 'At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God.'" In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat."
So one of the great advantages of having to go to seminary for 3 years and learn Greek and Hebrew is that you get to appreciate how many puns there are in the Bible. It's not worth it, but it is a benefit. I need to call attention to this. The word manna in Hebrew literally means "what is it?" Because they looked at it and they were like, "What is it?" And so that's what it's called. And so what it is, of course, is God's providence and God's care and God's love for God's people. It is the abundance of God. I'm going to be reading from the book of John, chapter 6. It says 1 through 21 in your bulletin, but that's really 2 stories, so we're going to read just the first 15 verses. And I invite you to listen now to the word of God to you. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little." One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This indeed is the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. This is the word of the Lord. So I was a skeptical teenager. I'm generally a skeptical person as well. And when especially when I was a teenager, when I read the miracles that show up in the Gospels, I always wanted there to be some, other explanation, right? Something that was a little bit less supernatural and a little bit more believable. This is a common thing for Christians to do, right? We say, the people that Jesus cast demons out of, well, we would understand that now as mental illness. We sort of medicalize, and therefore we understand that Jesus is a great therapist. And I remember one time, I was at a church. I remember the church exactly. I don't remember the sermon, or the preacher of the sermon. But they gave me something to hang on to with this particular passage. And I call it the stone soup paradigm for understanding the feeding of the 5,000. So traditionally, most folks have understood the feeding of the 5,000 historically to be a miracle of bread and fish, right? That is when Jesus blessed and broke the bread and shared the fish, something happened in the bread and fish that caused there to be more. Maybe the disciples were distributing bread and they would rip off a piece and then they would look down and the bread is still just the same size, like the proverbial mug of beer that never runs dry. Or maybe it was like one of those math problems, like a theoretical math problem, where every time they broke it in half, the halves were the same size. Any way you look at it, the traditional understanding is that in some way the bread and the fish broke the laws of conservation of mass to be more than they were. So that's the sort of traditional understanding. Now this preacher in this sermon said, let's imagine something else. What if, maybe, just maybe, there was already enough food among the 5,000? That they weren't idiots, and they didn't wander off into the wilderness with nothing to eat for themselves, but they all had a little bit for themselves to make sure that they would get through the day. Only they weren't willing to share it, and so they would not admit that they had any food. And when they saw Jesus take this paltry amount of food and lift it up and bless it, give thanks to God for this tiny amount and break it and start sharing it, did they feel inspired by the trust that Jesus had shown, and they found some trust in themselves to share what they had? And so maybe you can imagine how this happened, right? Somebody would maybe break their sandwich in half and hand it to the next person. And maybe there's a group of people that are sitting around in a circle together, and they invite some more people into their circle because they know that they've got enough and it'll be all right. And so when the disciples go around handing out bread, the bread's not more. It's just that everywhere they go, people are like, oh no, we're already good. And in fact, there was so much already, so much abundance within the community that they had leftovers, that they had 12 baskets left over. Now this I thought was the coolest idea when I first heard it, because it solved my miracle problem, right? It solved the sort of supernatural, inexplicable, and it turned it into a logical, understandable. And I like that. I liked it especially then. But as I've gotten older, two things have happened that have changed the way I look at the story. The first is that my understanding of miracle has changed. I got to stick my head out into the world, and I saw that it's a hard place, and it can be a dark place, and it can be a cruel place, and humans can be so deeply unkind to each other that now when I think about a miracle, I think any truly selfless act between one person and another is a miracle. I really do. I'm not talking about taking care of our family and friends. We benefit from that. But any time somebody truly goes out and does something for somebody else that doesn't give them anything, that is a miracle. And it is deeply rare. And it's worth celebrating. So it's changed my understanding of what a miracle is. And as I think about it now, from my perspective now, maybe the stone soup paradigm is less believable. Because it would require that so many people, so many little miracles happen. The other thing that has happened as I read and reread it and learned about this parable is that I've started to realize that it's the same miracle either way you look at it. Because it's a miracle of trust. That is, Jesus took the little bit of bread that he had and the little bit of fish that they had, and he trusted that God would make it enough. And if we follow the stone soup paradigm, every person in the crowd who had a little bit of something, they did the same thing. They took their little bit and they trusted that there would be enough. They took their sandwich and they said, well, there's 5,000 of us, I can cover this guy. Or we can invite these people into our circle. Both of the miracles are about trusting God to do a lot with a little. Now, when you start to read the Bible and when you start to hear the stories, you'll notice that God's miracles of abundance always work this way. They're always about trusting God to do a lot with a little. God's abundance is present and real, but it requires trust. In 1 Kings 17, Elijah is the prophet in the land, and there's a major famine in the land of Israel. And God says to Elijah, I'm going to send you to Zarephath because there's a widow there who's going to feed you. And when he gets to the widow's house, he discovers that she's got nothing. She says, all I have is this little bit of meal and this little bit of oil, and I'm picking up some sticks so I can make myself and my son a cake, and we'll eat it and we'll die. That's all we've got. And Elijah says, that's all right. Go ahead and do that. Just first, give me something. And she does. She trusts that there will be enough. God's abundance requires trust. And in truth, in that whole land, in all of Israel, and Zarephath is outside of Israel, she was the only one who had a full belly every single day. Now, what did Elijah do that made sure that she had a full belly? Did he provide her with storehouses of meal and plenty of olive oil? No. It was that little bit of meal and that little bit of oil. It never ran dry. So every night she had to go to bed trusting that God would provide enough for her. God's abundance requires trust. And Nancy read the story of manna falling down, or I guess showing up in the mornings. And do you guys remember exactly how the manna worked? Right? They gathered it in the morning, but if they tried to save it for the next day, it turned into a rotten, squidgy mess and you couldn't eat it. Except on Fridays, because they couldn't collect it on Saturdays, and so that day it would last for 2 days. But they had to collect only enough for the day. God's abundance requires trust. If they collected more, it wasn't going to do them any good. They had to trust. Now God could have done this differently, right? God could have provided all of the manna in a payment up front. God could have set them up with all the bread that they needed, or money. God could have given them money so that they could buy the bread. Money is a more compact form of bread, right? We can purchase bread. And they could have taken that money, they could have put it somewhere that earns interest. Do you guys know the returns on just a modest return, 4% interest compounding annually for 40 years? I know we have retired people in the congregation, so we know these numbers, right? They wouldn't have had to go to the promised land. They would have been set for life. They'd be living high on the hog right there in the wilderness, but that's not how God did it. God's abundance requires trust. This is what we see over and over and over again in the Bible, that what God offers is not infinite resources, but the promise that we will have enough. And Jesus told us this, right? Jesus gave us the Lord's Prayer, and in the Lord's Prayer, we ask not for enough for our whole life, we ask for our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. That's how we are to pray. Because God's abundance requires trust. And all of this leads up to something. All of this leads up to, for me, a question. If God's abundance requires trust, if that's the way that God works, if that's the way the world works, then why are we waiting until we have enough? Why do we tell ourselves, I can do this when my ship comes in? I can volunteer after I'm retired and I have plenty of hours. I can share my resources after I make sure that my retirement is taken care of, that I've already saved enough for college. Why are we saying we can't do this until the building is paid off? Why are we waiting when God's abundance requires trust? The promise of God's abundance is not that we're going to be given everything all at once. It's not that we're always going to be confident that everything is taken care of for us. It's that we don't have to be in charge of making sure there's enough for ourselves. God has freed us from that. Instead, we are free to spend our lives and our time and our energy making sure that there is enough for someone else. Because God's abundance requires trust. What would it look like then if we trusted in God's abundance? What would it look like if we took our 5 loaves and 2 fishes and asked God to bless it and broke it and shared it and see how far it spread? What would it look like if we all invited somebody to our table? I'm old enough to know now what it would look like. It would look like a miracle.